Tommy Hernandez was a human highlight reel. Raw power, devastating knockouts, and a presence that struck fear into his opponents. But despite being one of boxing's most electrifying punchers, his record against the other four kings tells a different story. One lone victory, painful defeats, and after retirement, massive debt, controversial claims, and an unexpected downfall. How did a boxer who hit such highs fall to such lows? Let's break it all down. Thomas the Hitman Hearns wasn't just a great fighter. He was a force of nature. The first man to claim major world titles in 5 weight divisions, a Hall of Famer, and a knockout artist who could put your lights out in a split second. He was also one of the so-called for kings: Hagler, Leonard, Hearns, for legends who went to war in an era where champions actually fought each other. No ducking, no excuses, just brutal, career-defining battles to see who was truly the best. And while Hearns carved out his place in boxing history, his journey was anything but easy. Because let's not forget, he wasn't some naturally gifted prodigy. He was a skinny kid from Tennessee who looked more like a basketball player than a boxer. So how did this lanky underdog transform into one of the most feared punchers of all time? To answer that, we need to go all the way back to where the Tommy Hearns story really began. Born in Grand Junction, Tennessee, he was the youngest of 3 kids from his mother's first marriage. But life was far from easy. After remarrying, his mother had 6 more children. And when things didn't work out, she was left to raise all 9 of them on her own. That alone would have been enough struggle for most people, but fate had other plans for young Tommy. At just 5 years old, his mother packed up and moved the family to Detroit, Michigan, a city that would shape his future in ways no one could have imagined, because that's where a man named Emmanuel Stewart opened the doors to a grimy basement facility that would become the legendary, world-famous Kronk gym. And once Hearns walked through those doors, everything changed. The rest, as they say, is history. But before we get to that, let's take a quick step back. By the time he turned pro, Hernandez had already built an insane amateur record: 155 wins and just 8 losses. At 19, he dominated the National Golden Gloves in the light welterweight division, which is almost hard to believe when you remember he ended his career as a cruiserweight. That same year, he was named Outstanding National Amateur Boxer, and the signs were there. This kid was special. But back then nobody, not even Stewart himself, could have predicted just how far Hearns would go. He was tall, skinny, and awkward looking for a fighter. A 6'1" light welterweight who barely looked like he belonged in the ring. But looks can be deceiving, because once he entered Kronk, Stewart set out to transform him, not just into a good fighter, but into a knockout machine. And Hearns repaid his mentor in full. He didn't just become a champion, he became Kronk's first true superstar, putting the gym on the map and paving the way for generations of fighters to come in the process. But what came next? Well, that's where things get interesting. On turning pro, he wasn't just winning, he was destroying people. He raced to 28 wins and 0 losses, knocking out all of his first 17 opponents. By the time someone finally took him the distance, in his 18th fight, he had already built a reputation as one of the most dangerous punchers in boxing. Then came his first shot at a world title. His opponent, Jose Cuevas, a Mexican powerhouse who had ruled the welterweight division for 4 years. But Hearns didn't just take his belt, he took his soul. A second-round TKO. And just like that, a new king was crowned. That year, he was named Ring Magazine's Fighter of the Year. And it looked like nothing could stop him. He then defended his title successfully 3 times. But then he ran into a problem. Or rather, a Sugar Ray-sized problem. Yeah, you already know who I'm talking about. Sugar Ray Leonard. He had Leonard right where he wanted him. But in the end, he let him off the hook. And had Hearns just hung on during those final moments, his legacy and Leonard's might have looked very different. After suffering his first professional defeat, Tommy Hernandez wasted no time getting back to business. He racked up 3 more wins before setting his sights on a second world title. His target, Wilfred Benitez, a defensive genius and 3-weight world champion. It was a tough fight, but after 15 grueling rounds, Hearns walked away with a WBC super welterweight crown by way of majority decision. He was now a 2-weight world champion. But his biggest statement was still to come, because after one non-title fight and one successful defense, Hernandez found himself staring across the ring at a true boxing icon, a man whose name would be forever linked to his own, Roberto Duran. The fight was billed as Malice at the Palace, and for good reason. Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas had seen some legendary wars, but few expected the absolute massacre that was about to take place. Duran, having just lost a Hagler at middleweight, dropped back down to super welter in hopes of claiming Hearns' belt. One of the toughest fighters to ever lace up gloves had been knocked out for the first time in his entire career. For this, Hearns was awarded Ring Magazine's Fighter of the Year. For the second time, winning this award, even once, is considered a major achievement. So taking it twice meant Hearns was in with the elites. But in boxing, highs never last forever, because after delivering one of the most brutal performances of his career, Hearns would soon find himself on the other end of one. It was time for him to face the last of the 4 kings, Marvelous Marvin Hagler. And despite everything Hearns had achieved, despite all his highlight reel knockouts, his multiple world titles, this would be the fight that defined him. More than any other, not for how he won, but for how he lost. Now, if you're a true boxing fan, Marvin Hagler had won one of the most legendary fights in boxing history. But then the controversy, because afterwards, word got out that the night before the fight, wait for it, Hearns had a massage. No, not that kind of massage. Just a leg massage. But Manny Stewart was furious. He swore it had weakened Hearns' legs, making him less stable in the fight. Do you buy it? Could a simple massage have altered the outcome of one of the greatest fights of all time? Who knows? Sounds sketchy, but I guess we'll never find out. Following the fight and his failed attempt to capture the middleweight titles, Thomas Hearns was out of the ring for nearly a year. His comeback fight was against James "Black Gold" Schuler, and Hearns wasted no time claiming the UNABF middleweight title. But tragedy struck just 7 days later. Schuler was killed in a motorcycle accident. In a show of respect, Hearns returned the belt to Schuler's parents, saying, "He had it longer than I did at this point." Despite his loss to Hagler, Hearns was still the ring and WBC light middleweight champion, but he wasn't done collecting belts. He moved up again, this time to light heavyweight, where he defeated Dennis Andrews for the WBC title. And he wasn't stopping there. Next up, he dropped back down to middleweight to face Juan Roldan, taking his belt and becoming a 4-weight world champion. In the process, this guy was stacking up belts for fun. But boxing has a way of humbling even the greats. His next fight was against Iran Barkley, a tough, hard-hitting underdog who wasn't expected to stand much of a chance. But in one of the biggest shocks of the decade, Barkley landed a perfect punch, stopping Hearns in the 3rd round. The result was so unexpected that Ring Magazine named it Upset of the Year. For most fighters, a loss like that would be a career setback. But Hearns, he was writing his name in history books. Just a few months later, he bounced back by defeating James Kinkin to win the inaugural WBO super middleweight crown. And in doing so, he became the first fighter ever to win world titles in 5 different weight divisions. Once again, the Hitman had made history. And after nearly 8 years of waiting, it was finally time. Tommy Hernandez was getting his rematch with Sugar Ray Leonard. Not even tragedy was going to stop him, because on the very day of the fight, news broke that Hearns' brother had been arrested for the fatal shooting of his girlfriend. And to make things worse, it had happened in Tommy's home. It should have broken him. But when promoter Bob Arum rushed to Hearns' hotel room, he was met with an ice-cold response. "This is not going to affect me." Hearns told him put Leonard on the canvas again. The crowd could feel it. Hearns was getting his long-awaited victory. In that round, Leonard could have easily walked away with the win. That was the final chapter in Tommy Hearns' legendary wars against fellow members of the Four Kings. But his career wasn't quite over yet. Hearns managed to recapture a version of the light heavyweight title, outboxing the highly skilled Virgil Hill in what many consider the last great performance of his career. And somehow, even after years of battles and wear and tear, he still wasn't done collecting belts. He would go on to capture the UNABF, WBU, and IBO cruiserweight titles. And while these weren't major world championships, the fact that he was winning titles at 190 pounds when he started at 147 is almost unheard of. But as the years wore on, Father Time caught up with him. He suffered a second loss to his old nemesis, Iran Barkley, who took his light heavyweight belt. And in his first defense of the IBO cruiserweight title, he was stopped by Uriah Grant. That should have been the end. But Hearns had one more fight left in him. Fight Noah 67. He stepped into the ring one last time against Shannon Landberg, and in classic Hitman fashion, he ended it with a 10th round TKO. Then finally he called it a day. Hearns wasn't very good at managing his money. Or let's rephrase that. He was a little too good at spending it. By 2010, just 14 years after retirement, he was in such deep financial trouble that he was forced to auction off his boxing memorabilia to find nearly $500,000. To pay the taxman, he called it the battle of my life. But this time gloves wouldn't help him. To make ends meet, he sold priceless sentimental items. His championship robes, his fight trunks, and even his gloves. But that wasn't all. Gone was his classic 1957 Chevy. Gone was his custom-made Harley-Davidson. Gone were his 3 boats and his collection of all-terrain vehicles. The man who had once been on top of the boxing world had fought his way into financial ruin. And as we'll see next, the downward spiral didn't stop there. It wasn't just bad financial decisions that raised eyebrows when it came to common sense. Hearns didn't always make the smartest moves either. Take what happened when Marvelous Marvin Hagler passed away in 2021. Near the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was a sad day for boxing. But somehow Hearns made it worse. He took to Instagram, claiming that Hagler had been hospitalized after taking the COVID vaccine. Number sources, no confirmation. Just hearses, spreading a rumor that no one else was reporting. And just like that, the conspiracy crowd ran with it. The backlash was immediate. Hearns quickly deleted the post, but the damage was already done. Hagler's wife and son had to step in and release statements denying any connection between his death and the vaccine. In fact, it's not even certain that Hagler had been vaccinated at all. Can you imagine? A grieving family forced to fight off a ridiculous distraction while mourning a legend. Hearns might not have meant any harm, but this should have never happened. Sorry, buddy. Got to say it. But you embarrassed yourself with that one. And unfortunately, this wasn't the only questionable decision outside the ring, because then there was the arrest. At one point, Hernandez found himself in serious trouble when he was arrested for allegedly hitting his 13-year-old son during an argument. All right, let's put all the personal stuff aside and focus on what really matters: legacy. Because when it comes to boxing history, his place is secure. An International Boxing Hall of Fame. A warrior from one of the greatest eras the sport has ever seen, and a man who gave us some of the most unforgettable fights of all time against the other members of the Four Kings. Sure, he only scored one official win against the group. He came inches away from beating Sugar Ray Leonard twice. And his fight with Marvin Hagler, that wasn't just a loss, it was an all-time classic. He was also the first fighter to win major world titles in 5 weight divisions, a 6-time world champion. And incredibly, he even won belts at cruiserweight. which is insane. For a man who started as a skinny welterweight, his style was unique tall. He wasn't perfect inside or outside the ring. But if we're handing out respect, yeah, Tommy the Hitman Hearns deserves his, but what about you? Was Hearns your favorite of the four kings? Or did you ride with Leonard, Hagler, or Duran? And what do you think of his life after boxing? Plenty of fighters have had worse downfalls. But losing $500,000 after making $40 million, that's tough to defend, you have to admit. We're sure you've got plenty to say. So drop your comments below. And if you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe, because we've got plenty more boxing stories coming your way. See you in the next one.